Okay, well, so it's 4 o'clock plus. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Quorum is present, Amy Anderson, Karen Paul, and myself, committee of three with staff support. I would like to, first of all, call for public comment. We have a quorum, so we have a public comment question. If there are any, Joel, please.
Yes. Can the committee members hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this portion of the agenda is to allow for general public comment for items not listed on today's agenda. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes. And if you need to make input for today's meeting, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Riley, I see no raised hands.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. We have one action item and several discussion items, which I hope will lead to some action by the committee today. So anyway, let's start with action items. We have the minutes from the June 27th meeting. Any comments from the committee or public comments too? Yeah, Karen. Yes.
I would just like to thank I guess it's Joel who prepared these minutes. I really needed them because I couldn't attend that meeting. So they were very, very useful to me, and they were well done. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just have one comment on the second page of the minutes under item 2. The last 3 lines, which are B, hire an in-house staff member, and C, hiring an outside PR firm. My recollection is that the to work on Measure J and building community support around the initiative was what the outside PR firm would do. So we'll correct that after Joelle and I sit down and review the tape. But
I'm sorry, what are you going to correct?
So it says in B, on the third to last line of item 2, it was hire an in-house staff member to work on Measure J and building community support around the voter approved initiative, and C, hiring an outside PR firm. I think what we were really saying is hire an in-house staff member to work on all things public outreach, and then try to get an outside firm to do the thematic work on Measure J. We're actually going to talk about what big themes we're really talking about here, but it would be the outside firm working directly on building community support.
Yeah,
So
I remember that too.
Yeah, but we'll go back through that, and if in fact we've reversed these a little bit, we'll change them.
Okay, well, I'd move approval of the minutes with the slight editing that was mentioned.
Second.
I move in second by Amy. So roll call, please, Joel.
Joelle?
You're muted.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
Okay.
Committee member Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Riley,
Yes,
the motion is adopted.
with one abstention.
Yes, that's correct, with 1 abstention.
Okay, the next are discussion items. I just want to make a little statement before, Dave, I turn it over to you. We've had this topic on our agenda for the last 2 meetings. This is the 3rd meeting. I hope we end today's meeting with at least 2 recommendations to the full board. One is something about the staff support around the outreach talent that we need. And second, a consultant that might provide the outreach assistance that we need. So I will be looking for 2 actions sometime today. I think it's time that we make a decision and move something to the full board.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my opening. So Dave, you want to start it off?
Yeah, I'll start with my opening.
Okay.
Which is what we're struggling with is a real strong desire by you all as subcommittee members of the board itself, but the board in general, champing at the bit to get to the messaging. And what we're struggling with at the staff level is what I call the the delivery infrastructure. We're not high on print media as a mechanism. When things are newsworthy, we have all the newspapers coming to us, or we go straight to them, and they typically do what we ask them to do. We're not really high on direct mail because of its expense and the propensity of people to just pitch it, especially those of the folks who live in PO boxes, which is Carmel Valley, and a lot of folks like that. But generally speaking, the reach is not strong. What we're super high on is the way a lot of you get a lot of your news, good or bad. You know, Rudy Fisher sends a letter and he CCs everybody, and then it gets sent again, and the next set of people see it. Public Water Now does a distribution, Landwatch does a distribution, Constant Contact, MailChimp. And that's I think the most effective infrastructure is you send it to people, they send it to their friends, and it's an electronic distribution to opinion makers. And we don't have that yet. And so, you know, we keep looking at really the failure of TMD on our behalf of not building up what we had hoped that they would build up in that first year and a half. And that's what we need before we can start the push effort to get things out. But that means you'll be sitting on your thumbs for a couple of months before we hire a permanent person to do all this heavy lifting, who can then help educate an outside consultant and so forth. So either way, we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't. That's our situation right now, is we don't have the best means to push messaging, but we don't want to sit and wait for that to happen to get control of the narrative, as you've said. And Amy did a nice piece that I thought she had shared with some of you on the Did You Knows.
I did.
And George had sent along to both Karen and I some issues about opportunities and priorities. And I think that's kind of where we stand, which is why the first part of the staff note was, what need are we trying to fill? And is it singular on just Measure J, or is it all about countering Cal-Am's messaging, or is it flipping that, promoting the district's views on supply and demand, need for decel rates, others, or is it telling the district's story through things like the Did You Know series that Amy promoted, or we used to use our Water Matters for newsletter header and so forth. And I was just kind of kidding with, what are you talking about? But the idea being that there'd be a regular recognizable series of things.
Mhm.
The thing I like about Landwatch is when they send an email notification, it's identifiable. It's it's Landwatch. Marina Coast Water District sends a lot of conservation messaging, and it has the same look and feel all the time, and it's not too deep, not too over the top. And so that's where we would like to be on kind of a regular messaging basis, and we're just not there yet. But I guess our question to you is, let's break this thing into two parts. What is the narrative that you're trying to move? And is it more than just Measure J? And then B, let's talk a little bit about the how, the delivery vehicles, because they really are two separate issues. And I guess that's also the same direction you're going to need to be able to say, this is our consensus as a committee to the whole board, that the message we want, or the narrative we want to control, is blank.
Dave, I'd like to question a little bit about that being the limit of what we, or the extent to what we talk about. I think we're amateurs in the PR business in general. And so to expect us to come up with what may be the strategic, I'm going to use strategic and narrative a lot in what I talk about, the strategic value of one thing or the messaging that is more strategic than a different message is a different dialogue that needs to take place. And that's where I think an outside consultant will bring some new thinking to the process, not just what we do internally here. And so I don't want to limit us to thinking just within a parameter that we as staff and amateur PR people, we're just board members, okay? But
no, that's really a solid statement. I agree with that. You know, in many respects, it would be a getting to know you experience with them trying to, you know, pull out of you some things that they can then come back to us with and say, all right, here's what we're thinking as a campaign or as a messaging.
so Karen, yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with your point, George. But we could get into a chicken and egg thing. So I think the board, I mean, we can say what are the most important area, you know, subject areas and themes as far as we know now, and subject to revising that based on work with a consultant. But we could, you know, we would have to start by telling any consultant, here's what we think are the most important things we need to be in communication with the public about. So for example, you asked about, is it only Measure J? I mean, personally, I think Measure J is extremely important, but it's definitely not the only thing. Water supply, keep people updated about water supply, very important. And also the conservation, you know, the Carmel River mitigation, the conservation. So, I mean, and others can probably think of some other areas. And if the list is too long, well, you know, we won't be able to, we have to prioritize, but we could start with those.
So, yeah, so I get it. It really is the district story, both what's important right now, if there's something that's, you know, on fire, if you will, as well as, you know, we did a decade of excellence piece, which touched on really, you know, everything, water supply development over time. Oh, there it is on call in Stephanie's hands. And we ran it twice in the Herald, full page, and it was good reading. It was a good read. But again, we found, you know, the Herald's a tough one because people don't really subscribe that much anymore. And they get a lot of their Herald news, you know, it's almost like retweets. It's re-emails. Somebody got it and sent it off to say, hey, do you see this? Do you see that? Or you get people like Mark Milan, who's actually a, you know, an information-oriented consultant out there. And he's on the Google search for anything water in Monterey, and he lists the articles, and then he sends it back to his clients throughout the state. And so sometimes I don't even have to read the Herald. I just have to wait a day and a half for Mark to email it back to me. And lo and behold, there it is. And then it goes out to, you know, several hundred people on his distribution list in water in California, which is why sometimes I bump into people from, you know, the San Diego area, and they say, oh, you've got your hands full up there in Monterey. I'm like, how do you know? But they're, you know, they're on somebody's distribution list for some things, and they open it and they read it. So, but I'm getting the message that it's really just the story of the district, both current events and recurring themes, which is a little bit what we try to do with the monthly branding ads, but those are just eyeball pops. Those aren't really messages.
So, coming up soon. Well, first of all, I'm thinking this $10 million grant that was just awarded. I don't know if there's been a news article about that. I mean, you've been very busy with testimony, a heavy lift, but
yeah. Well, so Mike
and then there's
or Rachel, who's on from Monterey One Water, they are working on a press release for that right now.
Great. We're hoping for a decision from the PUC on the
Purchase agreement.
the expansion. You know, there'll be a proposed decision. I don't know if that's going to be newsworthy or not, probably, but, and then a final decision, maybe October or November. So we will, we should get ready for how we're
Well,
going to.
Yeah, and in those types of things, Stephanie and I, when we had our pre-meeting, talked about that would be very timely for returning then to each city council and saying, here's the recent decision, here's what its implications are, here's the timeline. But it also means then that we would be doing an allocation of water to each jurisdiction. So there's meaning behind the decision. Our ongoing dispute over how much water is enough for the community and the supply and demand analysis, which was subject to our testimony and Marina Coast's testimony, comes into play because that would be a real timely one for getting us back out doing an update to the city councils and some of the government affairs committees at MCAR, the realtors who put out a nice piece of mistaken information over the weekend.
Mhm.
So we've always kind of taken an approach that there's speaking to opinion makers and there's distribution to opinion makers. But the strongest bang for us is when we target the message to a group that will tell their friends. There was a request, I don't know if it was one of you, but by our board member saying, oh, Cal-Am just did this water forum. We should do a water forum. And we've done open houses for the district before, things like that. But you know who comes to them? The same people who are already interested in what we're doing. We seldom get a lot of new people who say, you know what, instead of going to a Little League game tonight, I'm going to go over to that district open house so I can learn a little more. And we're very welcoming when we get them. But, unless we had the big issue that people want to hear about, like some of our Measure J at the Embassy Suites, really well attended because it was a real hot topic. When we implemented our water supply charge, big, couple hundred people showed up for a public hearing. So there's certain times and certain actions where people really want to come out for those things. But I'm beginning to see that you guys kind of agree. It's the whole portfolio of outreach that needs attention. It's not just a single thing. And we need a professional in addition to a staffer.
Let me get Amy into the dialogue. I saw her hand a while ago.
Well, I was just gonna say, you mentioned somebody, I get the land watch stuff many a day, seems like. And I don't know who this other person is. Mark somebody?
When you say other person,
That you mentioned.
Mark Milan. Yeah, Mark Milan is just somebody who's worked on Monterey One Water and worked with us, and he's got a national following. He's not a public outreach style shop. He's more of an information distributor. He's been intimately involved in a number of places where they would do kind of survey and testing of, so like the Pure Water name, now at Pure Water, there's Pure Water San Diego, there's Pure Water.
Interesting.
There's 7 of them now. Pure Water Soquel Creek. They did the original consumer testing for what resonates really well. Pure Water, advanced purification, those kind of things, even better than advanced water treatment, advanced water purification. So some of the nuance in our language that's now being embraced kind of across the industry, Mark had his fingers involved early on with recycled water. So he's a guy who's got a mailing list, but he's not somebody we're thinking about for PR help, so to speak.
My point about asking about him was just, and I've never received anything from him that I know of, is we want, especially in anything that, for instance, correcting the things that the realtor or
yeah,
hospitality,
Association of
whatever it
Realtors.
was.
Yeah.
We want a lot of people to get the same thing from us when we're correcting it. We don't want one mailing list. We want it to be global enough that people will see it. And it's, so they all have, here's the correction, or here's how it really works. And I guess that's going to take a professional to figure out how that gets out there and not cost too much money. As I agree with you about mailers, I think media is a better idea.
Yeah, and it's quite a bit easier if you're, let's say, Cal-Am, and you have customers who've signed up for email blasts.
Absolutely.
So they've all opted in, and that's actually your direct
Yeah.
constituency.
Yeah.
And so we've struggled a little bit, but because we don't have a big list, we've got the folks who want our board packets and our committee packets. But Stephanie and I have spent a lot of time identifying targeted groups that we need, but we haven't executed because we don't have the time to execute. So, it comes back to that where,
Yeah.
but we also don't want to cede total control to a consultant and say, all right, develop targeted MailChimp email distribution lists and then lose control of those lists, which, in the past, that's a little bit why we've always tried to focus on local outreach firms so that we could treat them more like staff and say, here's what we want, but don't keep it too far from us. We don't want you to just control our website completely. We don't want you to control our mailing list completely. Because when you're gone, it's not just that, but Stephanie has things that have to go out to hospitality. So we need that targeted list, which we actually have a pretty good one now. That was physical mailing though, right? Those were letters.
Those were physical, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to get better with the email blasts. We've got a number of entities who do not want to share their email lists. So all we can hope for is we send something to them on a notification and say, please feel free to share this with all of your constituents. And so that's kind of the running agreement with MCHA, the Hospitality Association, if it's relevant to their constituents' needs. So they're probably not just going to send out a puff piece on, our fish rescues, but they'll send out something on conservation fines and penalties for water waste.
Mhm.
But that's all right if we're working with other organizations that have a mailing list. That's okay with that, because there will be some organizations that will be very supportive of whatever the issue might be, or generally, and then they might feed back into other people who are getting or not getting other information. No wonder why they're not getting it. I just think you can't predict exactly how the general public will react to news or information.
Yeah.
But all you can do is push in that direction. And that's what I'm thinking. I want to go back, Dave, to a little bit of question about what you call the infrastructure. Some things need to wait for an infrastructure. And I'm not sure if I don't like the word wait necessarily, but I don't know what I want to understand a little more about what you mean by the infrastructure.
Well, I think the good example is what we were just talking about is targeted emailing lists, email lists.
Okay.
And so, open one of your emails at some point, and if you scroll to the bottom, it'll often say powered by Constant Contact or powered by MailChimp. And there's a few others, but those are the two biggest ones. And it's email driven. And hopefully you're monitoring your bounce back list. So when an email link goes dead, then you clean up your list. I was always trying to expand it. The reason I get Marina Coast Water District conservation notices is because I'm in their GM's email list. And at some point somebody said, hey, here's a name in the water industry on the peninsula, add them to our distribution list. So, we have many, of our staff, you got 30 different personal contact lists that need to be culled so that we can build a bigger email list. and you know, so that's the type of thing that we just have. The infrastructure for electronic distribution has broken down. And right before this last round of conservation efforts, even the written list had somewhat broken down, because the last time we sent targeted mailings was, you know, over probably 2 years ago. And so you had to look at it again. You had to look at the names, or,
Changes, yes.
you know, so.
Well, I want to take it up to 10,000 feet, a little more, and think that infrastructure is in terms of the capability of staff to deliver.
Yep.
And so I want to look at district infrastructure rather than the mechanics of distribution of information. And I think the two things we've been talking about on this committee is a staff support, which can handle, I mean, at least deal with, or attack or address or whatever, these lists, these outreach organizations, the kind of structure of sending information, not what the information is, but sending the information. And I think then the second piece of the infrastructure, I think, is not only some internal talent, but also some external talent that will bring strategic thinking from their experience, a narrative, which I think we are missing, and we need to focus a little more on what the narrative might be for the district in terms of, you know, pushing a certain narrative to the community. And it's telling our story, but also it's telling our history. It's also telling about what's likely to come. And there are things, many things that are on the horizon just in the next 3 or 4 months. And I think we need to act pretty quickly to try to get in front of those, or at least catch up to them, because I just think there's a possibility that we may lose some of the narrative dialogue if we're not in it, and we need to be in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would suggest that if there are certain things that you're thinking about, George, you know, particular pieces that we want to get out there, we can do those in a local newspaper without, you know, saying, well, let's do this twice a month or something and spending too much money. If there's something that we want to get out before we have the lists, because I understand from, you know, being involved in a nonprofit organization, how important the lists are. And, you know, it's not really easy to clean them up. It's a lot of work. But it seems like you could use an alternate method to get out there. If we wanted to do something quick, we could use the newspaper. And
Well,
then that would get, you know, people would
And
mail it around.
Karen?
well, a few things. I'm a little frustrated by the conversation because I think we're getting into how, but I feel like there's we need to figure out some things at the 10,000 foot level. At least I feel like that. So for example, and I'm not sure how far have we gotten in figuring out what it makes sense to have an in-house staff person do and what it makes sense to have a consultant do. I mean, even if it's not set in stone, but do we have an approximate idea? And I see in item 3, Dave, you gave us these 3 different models. It seems like each of them, that would be a somewhat different answer. So I'd like us to, that's one question is, are we clear yet on what we want from a staff person and what we want from an outside consultant? And obviously we know we need some strategic thinking of a professional PR person from an outside consultant, but beyond that. And one question I have, which is not really at the 10,000 foot level, but related, is our website. It seems to me, I mean, obviously we can't do everything at once. Some things, you know, the things coming up in the next few months, we're just going to have to do our best, as best we can. And some things will be longer term. Our website, I mean, can use our website as a major way of communicating with people. So making our website serve our purposes better, it seems like that should be one of the things early on our list. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to suggest an approach. I think we need to get some action. And I think a staff person is going to take maybe 2 months to finally get a decision on that. And then there's going to be 2 months to get their feet wet and all the skill sets that they see and they bring and to the table and where their priorities might be, or they see they can do right away and what they take a little more time and so on. I think we have two kind of timing issues here. One is it takes a little time to recruit staff and find the right person and so on. And I would like us to recommend approval of that position today to the full board and get that off the table, because we don't know, and we will not know until somebody is hired what their skill set might be, or their strengths, or what they really need to spend a little time on about what Dave's already given us. Dave and staff has given us this grid that's got 40 items on it. And what's the priority? I don't know. What's the most effective? I don't know. What's the easiest to do? I don't know. What's the least expensive? I don't know. But this person will figure all that kind of stuff out. I think what we need in the short term is somebody who can give us some advice on the strategic issues that are coming and getting the public's attention around some of those, and then how we present that. And if it's press releases, somebody's got to write them. If it's just some kind of output that we make in some fashion, I don't know. But I think what we're missing is a timing issue here. And I think, and I just want to go over there PUC decisions that are going to come out. There's the LAFCO decision is going to come out. There's the Pure Water Monterey that may or may not, whatever that's going to be. All that's in the next few months. And I think we're not prepared. If Dave could be cloned and we had 2 of them, then I wouldn't be as concerned. But I don't think we can count on that. And I would like Dave to get the support, and the staff to get the support of a strategic thinker, somebody who's been in that business, who can highlight the language that we ought to be using, not necessarily the subject matter, but the language we ought to be using to tell our story, the district story, where we're going, and this. Let me just give you a simple example. Recently, we just approved that we're going to move forward with trying to prepare an offer to Callahan. And so my phone's not ringing off the hook, but I must have had 6 people over the last 10 days or so that have been interacting with me to say, my God, how can we afford this? I went to Seaside City Council the other night, and I said, I'm getting a lot of these questions, and it's the difference between renting and buying. If you're renting, you will no longer pay your rent if you're going to convert to buying. You take something off the bill and you put something different on the bill. It's not on top of. And that was my simple statement to the Seaside City Council the other night. And Alvin was on at the same thing. And we'll comment on this when the board meets again.
Good.
But I think that message out into the community is something the district ought to be pushing now, not 2 months from now.
All right. I think that strategic thinking is going to come from an outside consultant. We can't expect to hire somebody and then have that person decide what her job description is. I mean, we can't hire until we have made some determination of what's in that job description.
Yeah.
You know, so
well, and I did include just kind of a potpourri of, when we had an internal position, what that job description was. The first time we went out, what the local but still outside consultant said their scope of services is. You see a lot of overlap between the two, but I do think the big themes, the correct language, the look and feel, the strategic thinking, it's definitely going to be an outside firm. Design, somebody internally is going to have a good eye for design. We certainly need to update our style guide, our style manual, and we need to decide if we're going to go out and if we're going to speak to city councils, well, what's the look and feel of our product, and it should be recognizable, and it's a district presentation. And so there will be a little overlap with the outside person and the inside person on developing some of that. But, you know, you've mentioned the website. We do a great job with a very kludgy system. You know, it looks pretty good to the outside world, but it is not a well-designed current website product. And we can have an outside person do it. Our big fear is we don't want it to be a mystery. We want to know how to update it ourselves and get the, you know, the internal information controllers being able to update it. So what we need is the look and feel and the navigation done by an outside firm with a lot of training on internal people so that we can control the content.
Mhm.
But that's got to be done soon, and it's got to be done in parallel. We need to do this. And, you know, every time I talk about it, I run into a barrier when I say, oh, well, if we do that, are we going to then change our management of our agenda packs? Because you'll see most modern public agency websites, they're not just throwing up a PDF or an HTML version of their board packet. There's a whole little management page where it says meetings and agendas, and it's a subunit. It's a piece of software that plugs into your website, and your web designer makes them link. Well, do we want to do that? Then are we redoing our overall agenda management software? And that's where I've ground to a halt several times, because then the project becomes bigger and bigger. So, you know, I think we need to probably break those in two and get the website fixed before we do agenda management software. But, you know, these are things that would be helpful to have that web designer on board with the outside public outreach person weighing in with some advice on, you know, what you should see on your website that's consistent with other initiatives that we're going to have done out here. So you're right that we need to get going. It's going to be a struggle because we really have three needs that are all immediate: the inside person, the outside person, and the website person. And they're not all going to be ready to work with each other if they're all happening at the same time. But I think we just have to do it. Now, we can do an RFQ. You know, Mary has mentioned Rally, and their website is, you know, We Are Rally. Safwat and Amy checked them out. Kapow. You know, these are statewide firms. There was a link that Amy sent with some of the competitors. None of the competitors were really here. They were more like other firms in the nation who compete in a similar fashion. You know, locally, we're still kind of stuck with the unresolved issue that there's really only two firms that we've never used who might be capable local. And, you know, one is Wellman Ad. We've had multiple conversations about that, and the other being Spoke, and we've never had a follow-up with Spoke. But we could do an RFQ to, you know, both local and statewide firms. You know, Kapow is Sacramento. We Are Rally, I believe, is San Francisco. They have multiple offices, but we try to be sourced out of San Francisco. And I think we need to come up with, you know, one or two other legitimate, you know, not straw men, but somebody we genuinely consider, and get moving on that.
Well, I'd like to push the issue of timing as much as qualifications. And I'm kind of curious. I don't say curious. I'm concerned that we may lose a lot of ground if we go through a lengthy process. And I don't know how lengthy this RFQ process is. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Dave. But I also understand that it's entirely possible for local agencies to pick a consultant and just go with that recommendation or go with the recommended consultant without an RFQ.
Absolutely.
Because it's a known quantity, and and there are obviously qualifications and other characteristics that need to be understood and written down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but specialized services, if you've got a firm that you like, that you think is uniquely capable of providing what you want, and there's a timing issue, you have the authority to sole contract.
Well, and what I'd like to do is this is a little agenda management, very local and small scale agenda management that you mentioned, Dave. That's this agenda for today. In the agenda are listed 3 different discussion items. I think they're all rolled together here as a single discussion. So I just want to make sure that anybody in the public would be willing to kind of just accept that, and that we're talking about one discussion, but the 3 subject areas that have been identified are all part of this discussion. So we're not taking them separately.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that. And also, I would like to, and if it's okay with the committee, but I'd like a reaction to this too, and well as the public. I'd like to take up the staff position first and have some decision that we're going to recommend something to the full board around the staff position, and second, take up a consultant question. And I would like to just start moving items off the action items so that we can stay focused or be more focused. I mean, does the committee have any objection to that approach?
I'm just not clear on what you're proposing, George. You say first the staff, so you're saying do one at a time. First, put together the start the hiring process for the staff person, and then look for the consultant, and not try to do both at the same time?
No. I'm only thinking about today's meeting. Let's decide first on the staff position, then second on the consultant, and that's for today's meeting.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And then what I'd like to do also is, unless Dave, this is a problem, I'd like to go out to the public at some point and see what kind of input we might get from them. But should we wait until we kind of focus on our action items, or?
Well, I think the direction to staff is going to be bring as soon as possible a new position on the org chart, or bring back the old position. We used to have a public affairs liaison. Our HR person at the time really liked the word liaison because it rolled so nicely off her tongue. But
along with concours d'elegance.
Yeah, exactly. So we will name a position and do a posting, but we'll bring that to the board. I think we can do it for September. If you want to go out at the same time for an outside consultant, I guess we need to hear from you whether you want to try to pick somebody you're comfortable with, if you want us to just bring people in to pitch the committee, or if you want actual proposals. I think one of the things we learned with those of you who were, I think all of you were on the League of Women Voters, was PAHRO does a lot with an outside consultant, but they budget for it. And so, $200,000 is 4 or 5 times more than we've ever paid in a year. And sorry, Rachel, I know you're on from Monterey One Water, but the position's got to pay over 110,000. I've got Rachel's 2021 salary over here on a piece of paper, and she's worth every penny of it, probably worth more of it. But it's not cheap to hire somebody internally. So, when we last did this, I don't know if you even did the math, but the salary range back in 2011, I think topped out at $5,400 a month or something like that. It was a $70,000 a year style position. And, in an organization the size of Monterey One Water, it's $120,000 a year position.
Wow.
Well, Here's what I'd like to do, and I need the committee to, support this if we're going to go this direction. But what I'd like to do is go out to public comment on staff position only. And we'll have a separate public comment on consultant. But so we can kind of take these in order and try to narrow the conversation to specific ideas about going forward.
Fine with me.
Okay, so Joelle, can we go to public comment on the idea of hiring a staff person that will be an outreach specialist on staff?
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Riley, I see no raised hands.
Okay, well, I'd like to just move this along. I'm going to move that the committee recommend to the full board the retention of a community outreach specialist on staff for the district.
I second that.
Any comments more?
Well,
Does this
how
need-
much, the question for Dave, how much should we suggest in terms of specifics? I mean, like salary range and qualifications.
Yeah, well, if we're going to hire, we're going to have to put that all into a posting. So I think we would, I'll sit down with Simona. We'd come up with the job description and a suggested range, and that would be what we'd ask the board to approve at the September board meeting.
And this needs to be a full-time position.
Well, so that's the dilemma. I think that if we had a good outside consultant, keep in mind, we outsourced all of our outreach for many years, and it worked pretty well. Stephanie was the inside person. And so what was lost in that setup was if we had some other person who's maybe a third of their duties were assigned to outreach, then we can manage the distribution lists. Then we can, could it be an ASD position? But right now we don't have somebody that we can say, hey, a third of this person's time is going to be these, the grunt work of managing that infrastructure. Because if we had our outside consultant who is tasked with a lot of that stuff, then it's not a full-time position. And over at Monterey One Water, I think Rachel picked up managing their federal lobbyist, and Mike is maybe doing the state lobbyist. What we would do here if we had a full-time position is maybe steer them a little bit more into doing some of those legislative work. On this, the grid that we've talked about, there's a lot of stuff on there.
Mhm.
But at one of our previous meetings, I kind of bolded and changed the font saying this is outside, this is inside. But a lot of that's just maintenance. I mean, right now, Joel and I have been having a discussion about, should it become one of his objectives for the next year to, every second week, set some time aside and go poke his way through our website and see what looks out of date. Are there any dead links? If there's things that are out of date, going to the division manager or the holder of the information and having that person update it. There are some things that may fall on his plate if we don't get this thing done soon. If we actually had the person, that would be something that person would be doing as well, is poking at the website, making sure it's current, making sure, we're not patting ourselves on the back for something we did 7 years ago, as if it's, on our front page, news link. Sometimes these things just get old and stale, and, they're right on the homepage. So that's been part of our dilemma, is that it may not be a full-time job if you've got the right outside consultant. And, even trying to train up the outside consultant, if they don't have local knowledge, that's going to fall to one of us probably, because the new person won't have any of that local knowledge. So
So do you propose a different approach then to a full-time like a consultant and
well,
not create a new position in-house?
I think Stephanie and I have come to realize that it can be made full-time, that there's enough to do, and there's enough that has to be diligently updated every 6 months. So I think that's the genesis of this was, all right, what could we pile on a person? Is it a full-time position? And the answer is it can be made a full-time position. That being said, that person would interface, the primary point of contact for an outside person who's doing messaging, theme, big pictures, strategy, that kind of thing. And I think that would be the model. It just seems, for an organization of our size, it just seems like it's almost too much. But I don't see a way to be effective if we don't do that. That's the thing. It's almost like if we don't do too much, we're not going to do enough. And that's what's happened to us is we tried to just right size it, make it affordable, and then it fell apart. I mean, the TMD thing was actually, I think, really unfortunate because we handed them a blank slate and we said, the 3 things that we want you to do are get to know us, which means attend our meetings, spend time with staff talking about what it is you do. Some things like George has said, we want the outside consultant to think strategically on our behalf. TMD never did that. Figure out how we can better deliver, which is kind of, the infrastructure issues. That never really happened. But other firms can do that. And so, now we're kind of saying, in the long run, we want control over our infrastructure, the MailChimp or Constant Comment with somebody who knows how to do it and how to do it effectively.
Website.
But if somebody else is doing the design and, the common themes or even the style guide comes from the outside person, and then we adopt it, then it's our inside person who's going to make, others. Joel and I were just talking about, we've got photos. If you just said, hey, we're going to do this newsletter on fish rescues, give me a fish rescue photo. Well, I know where to find them. Stephanie knows where to find them. One of the best things TMD did for us was update a lot of our fieldwork photos. But you know what? You're supposed to have that kind of information right there in a central repository. And what we have is 7 different people's sets of photos. And we're still pumping out PowerPoints with, the guy sitting there turning the head of a valve.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked here for 7 years. And so updating, keeping it current, these are some of the grindy things that the in-house person would be doing that need to get done that we have not been able to do.
But, I've never seen this done before, but I'm asking a question. Could the public announcement for a job opening also include kind of a little parenthetical phrase, sufficiently qualified part-time work may substitute for full-time work or something? I don't know, so that you can get a couple of options about how you might judge the talent that is interested.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when we had a couple of blown searches for water resource engineer. We finally threw our hands up and said, let's advertise for a senior position and a junior position at the same time, because we don't know what we're going to get. And that may be an approach here that, all comers, we're not sure what we're doing. But, if somebody's looking for a half-time position, but knows this industry, that's meaningful. Or, now we're getting back into, do we have 2 outside people? And benefits are about 30% or more. So you hire somebody, you're grossing it up by another 30%. So there's certain benefits to having part-time as well. But I think we can also talk ourselves in circles and get nowhere. So.
Well, I would like to move this item and give you the flexibility to see how it's advertised and how you interview and what kind of talent that comes forward and how you deal with that. Because that would be your job. All we must do is acknowledge that we have a need in this area, and that and I'm wide open to some flexibility about how you may approach that. And if there's an agreement on whatever the consultant might be, or a decision, I'll say, on the consultant, then you have the picture a little more complete about what you're working with.
Yeah. And the only other thing I can tell you about, full-time position is if you had to make hard choices about who that outside consultant is, it's not like you're turning over the keys to the kingdom only to the outside consultant. You would now be relying on your own person to provide the direction and interface with the outside consultant. And I know, I'm speaking in code, but there's some highly capable people out there who may not be everyone's favorite because of affiliations and what have you, that, you could insulate yourself from that if you felt it was really important. We've also had, I think I spoke pretty honestly with you about the list of local folks. And I said, well, this guy's semi-retired and this one we tried, and so forth. Well, I got an earful after that meeting, I guess, for being too honest about our opinion on some people out there in the community. But when you're looking local, the personality comes with it. And every one of those people, if they want to be in public relations or public affairs, typically has a personality. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, got it there. Amy, I'm going to call for the question in a minute, but do you want to have a thought on hiring a staff and having some flexibility about how it's advertised in order to have a range of options for hiring, retention?
Well, I've never hired a person in this particular area, but I mean, if a person in this area, person in this position can also, if they have the time to do some of the things that people on the current staff are burdened with, it's a little too much, whether it's, looking at the legislative options or pulling together a bunch of photos that are all scattered around. If there's something to do that's important that will ease burdens on some of the other staff, then a full-time position makes sense to me. Oops.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure I'd say is going to ease the burden. It's the other staff just can't get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's some stuff that we've always wanted to have that we've just never had. So maybe it's just that opportunity.
Well, and I think it's not just what you've been doing or how you've been able to scrape by what you've been able to do. We want to get better at what we're doing. We want to get better at communicating with the public. We want to be better at consistency with the public. We want to be better at telling our story. We want to be better at, so this is doing more than what just is cleaning up around what we can't get to right now. No, it's that plus a lot more. That's how I see what we're trying to do here with the outreach.
Well, and ultimately, even though, yes, your general manager is in demand for Rotaries and other things, what we'd really like is this person to evolve into a spokesperson for the district and send them out to go to outreach meetings and things like that, which means you got to train them up. They've got to immerse themselves in some of the history, and they need to, he or she will need to learn a lot about the district quickly, but also have the bona fides so that when he or she goes out there, that somebody says, okay, that's the district's position, and I will accept that. And we never really got there with our liaison was also named Rachel. So Monterey One's current one is Rachel, but our Rachel never quite grew to that level before she got called back on active duty. And so it was, we never quite got there.
Well, but things evolve depending on, where we're going and where the district is going and what the high priority and what the skill sets are with the whoever's on staff and available and so on. I think that's to be worked out, but you still want the potential to have that ability on staff. So I'm going to ask for the vote on recommending the retention of a staff person for our public for outreach with some flexibility about how the general manager approaches the full-time, part-time option for the skills he wants. Yes.
Yeah, that I just want to add to flexibility also, as we discussed on listing the position potentially at a couple different levels, depending on the level of experience of the applicants. So
Yeah.
that seems like a good idea to me also. So I support all of that.
Okay, great. So can we have a roll call, Joel?
Yes, Committee Member Anderson,
Yes,
Committee Member Paul,
Yes.
Chair Riley,
Yes.
the motion
And,
is adopted.
and just for clarity, that was not a named action item. So that was just you providing direction, but you are unanimous in the provision of that direction. So we'll take it back and bring you something at the September board meeting.
Well, but hopefully it's headed for the next board agenda.
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay. Okay, so the next item, and I hope we can get a decision on this today as well, or a recommendation to staff, is a consultant. And I'm going to put in the push that the pitch that we have a lot of things facing us in the next few months. And I don't think, I think we need to pay attention to how we might be prepared to deal with some of that. Not that we know what the answers are, not we know what the exact message is, but I think we need to be in a position to begin to tell the public more about what it is that's going on with the district. And we need to figure out how we're going to do that. And I'm all in favor of recommending a consultant today to staff to present something to the full board at our next meeting. And I wanted to make sure we're all at least on that. Not that we've decided on the consultant yet, but are we willing to try to get that decision made today? That's what I want. That's my focus.
To recommend to the board that staff prepare a recommendation for the board on moving forward with getting a consultant.
Yes.
Yes, I support that.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
I mean, my only inward reservation is just that I know that all this makes more work for you, Dave. Hiring is so much work. And
yeah, but we need to get it done.
Yeah.
You know, I think
We do.
the two takeaways are you want our outreach effort to maybe be, you know, what they used to say, boxing a little bit above our weight. We need it to be as high quality and as well thought out as maybe an entity a little bigger than ourselves, because our issues are big.
yeah,
And
That
so-
is exactly right. Well said. I mean, our issues are big and we're taking on something that's a really challenging, thing we're trying to do. So we do need top quality. I mean, having the public engaged is so critical. So I think you said it exactly right.
Yeah, and we're going to be in this little wave of issues. You know, it hasn't really blown up yet, but there's stark differences between, I won't say just ours, but some of the public agency testimony on supply versus demand. Ours was just submitted on Friday. Marina Coast was also kind of in that direction. And really, there's a story right there. And I had told the Herald that you could expect some fireworks, but they're in a transition too. Whether Dennis Taylor's going to continue to write water appears to be what he's doing right now, but this Molly Gibbs or Briggs, ultimately is going to take everything. But there's that piece right now, and in about 2 to 3 months, when Measure J results, the appraisal results are starting to come out, you're going to be in the same position that apparently George was over that last weekend, where people are saying, like, how can we afford this? And there's like 5 or 6 things that need to be retold of the story about public ownership that is essentially your cover line, your cover story for why you might consider making a bona fide offer, why you might consider a resolution of necessity, because it does pencil out. It pencils out at 200 million, it pencils out at 500 million, it pencils out with a desal plant, without a desal plant. People have forgotten how to do their math.
Yeah.
And George is right about rent versus buy and so forth.
That's really good.
But, and you will have greater control. You'll get to see a rate study. You'll see what's in your rates. You'll know where to go to even talk about what are you spending money on. Most people can't find the PUC or even navigate their process. It's not a friendly process. So
Yeah. Who to blame, where to complain, right?
Yeah. So there will be a lot of issues that'll pop up around Measure J, which is, why the heck are you doing this? Well, the voters asked us to in a time far ago, or a land far ago, and a time forgotten, because people can't remember 2018 for the life of them, So the whole story's got to get retold, and it's got to be told in pieces. It can't all be told at once, and it'll be your top 5 list of why this is in the public interest. And that's a campaign right there. And then after that, we don't know if we're going to be in a bench trial or not in a bench trial. And our whole needs for public outreach could change if it dies at the bench trial. If it lives through the bench trial, we're going to have 3 years of real need. We'll be the neediest little public agency around, because it'll be all guns a-blazing. So anyway, but I think that there's a lot that we could do better. Did I want us to be ready to go with a press release on testimony on Friday? I did. Did we have it ready to go? No. But today's only Monday, so there might be something. But
I think there's a lot of storyline in the filings that we make, whether it's a PUC or whether it's in other places, even LAFCO or whatever. And I'm going to throw out Wellman Ad as my preference for going forward for any number of reasons. Measure J is kind of the big deal about the district going forward. And so much of what we're spending money on is around Measure J. Wellman absolutely was critical to the success of Measure J passing. I thought he had graphics. I thought he had messaging. I thought he had some discipline, enormous discipline that he applied to others like me on sticking to message and whatever. It was a 4-year project, though. I mean, I need to remind everybody of that. So at some point, maybe just the timing worked in our favor, because maybe people got tired of hearing us. But that's not my message. My message was, I think we had a message, and it was clear, and the voters agreed with that. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is that he's been a consultant with Monterey Salinas Transit Agency, which is another local public agency. And so he's been the specialist, the outreach specialist, message specialist, content specialist, image specialist for the transit agency as well. And that's another public agency that's local. He knows local. He's had 12 years or so with the Monterey Jazz Festival as their, professional messaging consultant. It's local. He knows local. And that's our job. Our job is not to communicate with Sacramento, not to communicate with PUC, except what we have to do. Our job is a local issue. And I just don't think you can beat Wellman Ad and Wellman personally for having the capability and the success and the experience and the tentacles into the community that he has. So anyway, I've made my pitch for starters. So, and I know that's been a little bit of a concern by others. I know that Mary on the board has had an opinion that's a little different than mine. And I don't know where that might end up going, but that's why I want to get it off of our agenda and onto the board's agenda, and let's get a decision made so we can move forward.
I don't feel that this is a time to pick an outside firm until we do a little bit more research into the ones we have in front of us. But I like Phil, and Phil did actually all of our campaigns, helped us with all of our campaigns, and he did a great job. But I don't want to provide something for our opponents to just raise hell about, and they will. If we hire somebody that was connected with public water, we hear every time that somebody from public water speaks, that becomes a subject of, people raise their hands and throw their hands about. And I think that that's exactly what we get again. Rather than focusing on the message, I'd be very, very concerned about the effect of somebody who was, it's not personal, but the effect of somebody who was involved in getting Measure J passed, who always spoke about it. I have serious concerns about that. I don't think it would be a wise decision.
Well,
I'm-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Right, okay. I think you're right, Amy, that this isn't the time to be talking about, which consultant to hire when, we haven't really reached out to some of the other possibilities yet. I don't have enough information. But I'll just say this. I also think very, very highly of Phil Wellman. I think all the praise that, both of you, the positive things, absolutely, really well deserved. I think the fact that he knows the issues already so well is a huge advantage. I'm not sure that the fact that he did the Measure J campaign is a reason, is necessarily a problem. But the fact that he has close personal ties to the director of public water, I mean, I have to agree with Amy, and Mary Adams made the same point at a different meeting that, it's just gonna give, it's just gonna create a problem to have our PR person be closely tied to public water in that personal way.
And Measure J, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that he did the Measure J campaign, I don't know, in my mind, that shouldn't really be a problem to continue, on Measure J, which is what this would be, in part at least. But the entanglement, I think, is very unfortunately, and I really do think it's unfortunate, because if it were not for that problem, he would be great. But that's
I don't want to throw myself in the middle of this particular one, and I don't want, for the first time in my 11 years, to have a topic between my board get settled in the cage and throw you in and lock the door and see who comes out. But, you know, the one thing I would have you think about is that if we do get somebody on our staff, then we haven't turned the keys over. He's working for us, but he's not directing our public outreach activities on his own. That's one. Two is there's not a whole lot of help we're going to get locally other than either his firm or maybe Spoke that Amy had turned us on to, who looks good on the surface, but we haven't had any contact with. And once you start moving away from that, and it's either a Sacramento-based or San Francisco-based or some other based firm, there will be things that we're not going to be able to get, and knowledge that won't exist. And so there is actually something to be said for the familiarity with the local issues and the resource being local, which has a certain advantage. It really does. And so you know, sometimes that overwhelms the negative possibly. And I'm not advocating, I'm just saying I could see maybe making it work so that there's just one arm's length of separation between how much of our message is totally under control of the outside consultant and how much it is of an outside consultant doing the work that we want them to do, which is us defining what it is. And obviously it'll be through conversation, strategic thinking, and the experience level of whoever the consultant is going to influence us. But if at the end of the day, it's us controlling the process and us controlling, you know, we being in charge of us and just saying, but we need somebody who can execute and execute beautifully, then it's maybe a different story. And I don't think we have to resolve that now or even in the cage match to happen later.
Okay, but it's an important point. Thank you for,
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I'm
then
talking about that having, I mean, the district is going to control the content. It's our story. It's
Right.
our issue. And so in that, with that matter, it doesn't matter so much if it's a local person or a very expert person that is elsewhere. I just do not want to do anything that's going to give our opponents another target to be really noisy and negative about.
Agreed.
And I think that would.
Well, if I can add a little more, first of all, Public Water Now is a separately organized 501c4. Melody is the head of that, not Phil. And during Measure J, Phil was a contractor to the project. He didn't run things. He just was very important to the messaging and the discipline that was required of that campaign. And he was a reminder, constant reminder of how important messaging was, as well as being disciplined about the message. He was a real cheerleader for kind of making a successful campaign. So, I mean, I can sure vouch for all of that. The thing I want to go back to is that I think there are needs we have now, and postponing this is only going to put us into January or so for some kind of conclusion, or December or November, even when nothing happens between November and January. If we're going to get anything done in the short run, and there are things happening in the short run, I mean, I look forward to the Los Padres Dam report, because I think that's going to be very controversial too. And that's on nobody's agenda. It's on mine, but you know, I just think we need some help. I just want a professional, strategic thinker who knows the community to be part of the discussion, the mix of discussion items that take place about what the district can do going forward. And I'm still there.
Well,
Well, I made a motion to, I don't know, I think I made a motion, at least I intended to make a motion to recommend Phil Wellman for consultant services to the district for messaging and strategic support. I don't know if there's, I don't know what we think the district, when this gets on the agenda, it's going to get a lot of discussion. But Amy, I mean, your fear of some, and Mary, maybe Mary's too, and I don't know, I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but what was more wild than the campaign for Measure J anyway? What more criticism could there have been? What more money could have gone into a campaign? What more people could have been opposed to it that we got then?
Well, we got it.
And
we
what
got
were
it
we afraid
passed.
of? We weren't.
We got it passed, right? And we're having enough trouble right now when it's already been passed, getting people to take it seriously. I mean, there's certain people on the other side that say, well, forget about Measure J. Well, you can't forget about it. It was a legal vote. And so, I mean, I'm grateful that it passed. I think it should have passed. But now is a different time. And it, you know, anything that they, I mean, look at the information the hospitality sent out. Anything that they can target us with, they will.
Well, what's new, Amy?
What's
I mean,
new
you know,
is the district hired somebody that was involved with Public Water Now and talked at the meetings, and, you know, it's, I just think that that's what will happen. I don't think they're going to look back and see, gee, he was really valuable to them, or, you know, and I don't know, but I do think that we should do a little bit of research, at least on this KPOW We Are Rally, call some of their clients. We have, KPOW has some local clients, City of Marina, and there was another one too. Have we called them to find out how are they working out? We could do that. Just to find out. We need more than one person to consider.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we recommend to the board that we ask staff to prepare a recommendation to the board that we start the process of finding a consultant, but that we not specify who that consultant should be at this time. In other words, in September, if our staff is able to prepare, you know, a proposal for the board to vote on in September on moving forward with a consultant, that we ask them to prepare, that we ask our staff to do that for September. In the meantime, if possible, see if look into the one or two other firms that might be able to do this for us. That's what I think we should do at this moment.
It would probably come down to one of these 3 or 4, but I think we have to look.
Well, I'm a little, I would like Karen or Amy to think about the timing, and then whatever it is that you, whatever ideas that you like, can you play out what the timing looks like on how this might work? Because I mean, I think that's a critical issue, and I just see more time taking place without necessarily, you know, we're not addressing the issues that are coming up soon, that some strategic thinking now would be helpful, or soon would be helpful.
You're absolutely right about that.
I do agree with that. But I don't think we should walk into this until we've looked elsewhere, because I think it could be a real problem. That's my worry. That draws an attention that we really don't need on the district.
Well, we could recommend to the board that they consider hiring Phil Wellman, in the meeting where this is discussed.
Yeah, you could bring that up, George, there.
Could there be a motion to recommend Wellman or issue an RFQ for, potential consultants?
Well, but it could be sole source if there were another, I mean, with Wellman, it could definitely be sole source. There might be another sole source option. So it doesn't have to be an RFQ, right? According to what Dave.
Right, no, okay, no, I agree with that, Karen.
Karen just suggested the motion that we bring it to the board looking for a consultant, right, Karen? That's what you made a motion.
Yes. Yes.
Essentially.
I mean, the point about timing is very, very,
Of course.
yeah, we don't want to drag this out. We want to do it as soon as possible. I completely agree. And this process can take far too long, but we could recommend to the board that they consider doing a sole source approach to hiring consultant, that Phil Wellman be considered, and any others that we're able to identify that look like they might be able to meet our needs.
I would second that motion, and then I would be open to our suggestions about how we could get some information, or who's going to get some information before the next board meeting on these others.
I want to add just a little bit of information on Spoke. They are local. I did track them down. I went down to their office. They were closed during COVID, but I did talk to someone over the phone. I asked them about local clients or clients in general, but I was particularly interested on the coast-side clients that they had. Then the woman I talked to, and I've forgotten her name, she said she mentioned a few. They're a foundation and a nonprofit consultant, so they're in our category of interest. I'm not saying that they weren't just out for corporate, clients. So I was said, well, I'm not authorized to. They were asking me who I'm from, where I'm from. I didn't tell them anything. I just said I'm just an individual. I know there's an interest in this area, and I'm just trying to do some little research. Anyway, so she shared with me that they had a contract with Landwatch, or they had worked for Landwatch.
Oh.
So I called Mike DeLappa after that, and he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, I've been here 10 years, and they've never worked when I was here." So whatever their connection was to Landwatch was some years ago. And they could not identify any other local agency. They identified a number of state agencies, respectable state agencies in my world.
Oh, they work for Chomp, they work for the aquarium, they work for lots of local.
Well, she didn't share that with me, so I didn't get that.
Yeah, I've seen their expanded list. We looked, my chamber music organization talked with them a number of years ago, and when they had a lot of clients, that was before COVID.
Well, my real concern, I can support the motion the way it's been presented, which I think just to confirm, Karen, is to recommend Wellman or a sole source with another provider that can happen soon. Or I'm not. That's not exactly what you said, but
Well, yeah, we can say that we discussed the really immediate need. I mean, the need to bring on a consultant to help us with the messaging as soon as possible, as well as a staff person, separate item. And I'm also mindful of Dave's point that depending on how you structure it, if the district basically is in charge and using the consultant to
Build the message,
create a
look to.
Create the look, the graphics, and help with
the tone,
messaging, giving our message in a way that it reaches the public in the most effective way possible. But we control what the message is, that maybe that is enough distance or separation of functions that we can, make that understood. So I would say, what I was suggesting is we tell the board that we need to get a consultant really as soon as possible.
ASAP, yeah.
And Phil Wellman is, we think that the board should consider. We understand, there's reservations because of the personal connection to the head of public water now, but that the board should consider it. And potentially any other good candidates that we're able to find.
We
I
wouldn't,
think we just give the list that we have, that we liked, or that were possibilities. We don't recommend.
That's okay.
recommend-
If you're clear on what that list is, I'm
Well, that's
probably
the,
behind. I haven't done as much work as you have on.
well, I think
I'll
ahead.
send you guys some links.
Okay,
we had some that we talked about the first time we discussed this, and we eliminated a number of those. I
Yeah.
think you said you somebody gave you hell for it, for what you said, but I don't know. I mean, at least right now, we've got We Are Rally, K-Pow, Wellman, and maybe Spoke. But
Yeah, yeah.
I wish we would eliminate non-locals just because it's going to take too long for anybody to get up to speed. If scope is local, which I didn't know about aquarium and so on.
well, they've had huge, yeah. I don't think there's a reason to do that. Maybe there's a reason to favor locals, but a professional organization, they deliver your message. That's the whole point. That's why you talk to some of their customers and see, are they doing that for you? Are you pleased with their ability to do that? Because that's the whole point.
Well, let's move this along. I think the motion is clear for me, from my standpoint. I'm not sure how it gets presented, Dave. But if you're comfortable with what seems to be the direction, then from my understanding, I think I am. Okay, and I'd like to move it along so we can finish the agenda.
is it clear enough for you, Dave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then Stephanie and I will roll up our sleeves on making sure you've got some information to work with.
Okay, well, and anyway, my understanding always is that the client controls the message, or client controls the consultant. So it's not like we're turning over the reins of the galloping horses to an outsider. We're
Yeah.
still in charge, the board, the GM, the staff, we're very much, and I think we have a lot of balls in the air right now. And I just think some outside thinking, some creative, input would be very helpful wherever it comes from. But and I think that's going to aiming to be, just very specific on my standpoint. I think some outside person is not going to have the sense of the community, at least not anytime soon. And that's a big weakness, I think, in trying to go out and using anybody on the outside. Okay, well, and unless there are any more comments, I'm going to call for a vote. Any more? No. Did we go out to the public on public comment on this? I don't think we did.
No, and
believe
you
so.
had lumped everything together.
But I did separate the staff from the consultant. So
Right.
Yeah.
But at this point, our public consists of Mr. Wellman and Monterey One's public outreach person and Cal-Am's designated meeting coverer, Tim. So,
well, let's ask. I mean, Joel, just ask. It's going to take
Yes,
30 seconds.
so if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. Chair Riley, I see no raised hands.
Okay, well, back to the committee, and would you call a roll call for the committee, please?
Yes, committee member Anderson,
Yes, I think we're
Committee
talking
member
about
Paul?
your, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Second.
Committee Member Paul,
Yes,
Chair Riley.
Yes,
The motion is adopted.
right. Thank you. I knew this was going to take a while, so I was hoping everybody had their snacks ahead of time. The last item, if we're going to spend any time on it, is future items for, items for future agenda. Hopefully we'll welcome a consultant, and we might welcome the process for a staff assistant. Okay, and any comments on what we should be on a future agenda, the next agenda? I have nothing.
We will think of something.
I'm sure you
Something
will.
will reveal itself to us, so.
I'm sure we will. And I'm
Exactly.
sure we're going to have to talk about the scope
Absolutely.
of work of the players.
Yeah, this is going to require deep digging.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're done as a committee. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very
Oh.
much. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. I knew
Thank
this
you.
was going to take a while. I appreciate it.
This is tough, but thank you.
Complicated.
Yeah.
It's
All
important.
right.
Okay.
Okay,
Have a good weekend, everybody, or week. Okay.
Week.
yeah, okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.